On December 13, 1937, Japanese forces captured Nanking, the capital of the Republic of China, after weeks of intense fighting. The city was already largely defenseless. But instead of bringing the battle to an end, the occupation marked the beginning of one of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Over the course of roughly 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers killed at least 100,000 Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers. Most modern estimates place the death toll between 200,000 and 300,000. Mass executions were carried out throughout the city and along the Yangtze River, where thousands were lined up, machine-gunned, and dumped into the water. Soldiers went door to door, dragging men outside to be executed. Prisoners of war were tied together and taken to designated killing grounds. Sexual violence was widespread. Women and girls were raped repeatedly, many of them murdered afterward. What makes Nanking especially horrifying is not only the number of victims, but the way violence began to operate on its own. These killings served no clear military purpose. They continued because no one stopped them, and because the victims had been reduced to something less than human in the eyes of their killers. A small number of foreigners who remained in the city tried to intervene. John Rabba and others established the Nanking Safety Zone, sheltering approximately 200,000 civilians. Minnie Vautrin protected thousands of women at Ginling College. Their actions demonstrated a crucial truth. The violence was not inevitable. It was allowed to happen. If Nanking shows violence unleashed through chaos, Unit 731 reveals something even more disturbing. Atrocity carried out systematically, deliberately, and in the name of science. Between 1936 and 1945, the Imperial Japanese Army operated a secret biological and chemical warfare program in Manchuria, known as Unit 731. Under the command of Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, the unit conducted experiments on living human beings, primarily Chinese civilians, Korean prisoners, and Soviet prisoners of war. Victims were infected with plague, cholera, anthrax, and typhoid to observe disease progression without treatment. Many were dissected alive and fully conscious. Limbs were frozen in frostbite experiments. Some prisoners were placed in pressure chambers until they died. Weapons such as grenades and flamethrowers were tested directly on human subjects tied to posts. The core horror of Unit 731 lies not only in brutality, but in language and mindset. Prisoners were referred to as logs. Once people were no longer called human, they were no longer treated as human. Atrocity no longer required hatred, only institutionalized indifference. After the war, instead of facing justice, senior members of Unit 731 were granted immunity by the United States in exchange for their research data. Accountability was sacrificed for strategic advantage. It raises an uncomfortable question. Can a crime be overlooked if the information it produces is considered valuable enough? On April 9, 1942, approximately 76,000 American and Filipino soldiers surrendered to Japanese forces on the Bataan Peninsula in the Philippines. Exhausted by months of fighting, starvation, and disease, they were forced to march more than 60 kilometers under extreme tropical heat to prison camps. During the march, prisoners were beaten, bayoneted, or shot if they collapsed, asked for water, or tried to help others. They were denied food and water for days. Bodies lined the roads. Estimates suggest that between 5,000 and 18,000 Filipino soldiers and 500 to 650 Americans died during the march itself. What is striking about Bataan is that it did not require an explicit order to kill. Death came through systematic neglect. In the Japanese military culture of the time, surrender was viewed as dishonor. Those who had surrendered were seen as having forfeited their worth as human beings. Bataan demonstrates that people do not die only from hatred. Many die because indifference is permitted to operate unchecked. Nanking Unit 731, and Bataan are not isolated events. They are different expressions of the same process: dehumanization. In each case, violence did not begin with chaos alone, nor with individual cruelty. It began when people were redefined as enemies, as objects, as expendable. Once that line was crossed, killing no longer required rage. It required only permission. But these stories represent only one side of the war. As World War II expanded, industrialized, and drew in new powers, the nature of violence began to change. Mass death would no longer come only from soldiers with weapons or from camps hidden in remote places. It would come from decisions made far from the battlefield, from maps, factories, and command rooms. In the next part, we turn to a different question. Not how people were stripped of their humanity, but how entire cities became acceptable targets, how civilian death became a strategic calculation, and how justice after the war proved to be selective. Because the most unsettling truth of World War II is not that atrocities were committed, but that, under certain conditions, they were justified, tolerated, or ignored.